We live in an era where the world has never been more connected, yet people have never felt more alone. You wake up to a screen, spend your day drowning in notifications, and fall asleep with the faint glow of a device illuminating your face. Every moment is filled with digital noise, yet beneath it all there's an emptiness, a quiet, nagging sense that something's missing. It's a paradox. Social media promises connection, but instead it breeds comparison and isolation. Every notification offers the illusion of importance, but rarely leaves you fulfilled. The mind, overstimulated by an unrelenting stream of information, rarely finds a moment to rest. And when the noise stops, when there's nothing left to distract you, you may feel a discomfort so unsettling that you reach for your phone instinctively. Anything to avoid sitting with your own thoughts. But why is solitude so terrifying? What is it about being alone that makes people uncomfortable, even anxious? It wasn't always this way. Throughout history, solitude has been the breeding ground of the world's greatest thinkers, creators, and spiritual leaders. Yet today, even a moment of stillness feels unnatural, almost unbearable. A study once asked participants to sit in an empty room with nothing to do for 15 minutes. They had only one alternative: to administer mild electric shocks to themselves. The results? The majority preferred self-inflicted pain over solitude. People would rather experience discomfort than be left alone with their own minds. Why? Because true solitude forces us to confront something we spend most of our lives avoiding: ourselves. It strips away distractions and reveals what lies beneath: our insecurities, our fears, the unprocessed thoughts we've buried under endless scrolling and mindless entertainment. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of the self that remains hidden, repressed, unexamined. Solitude brings it to the surface. And that is precisely why it's so powerful. The question isn't whether solitude is valuable. It always has been. The question is why we've abandoned it and what we've lost in the process. But perhaps more importantly, what happens when we take it back. To understand what we've lost, we need to look back. There was a time when solitude was not just accepted but revered. Philosophers sought it for contemplation, artists embraced it for creativity, monks withdrew into silence to deepen their consciousness. Even as children, before screens infiltrated every aspect of life, solitude was a natural state. You could sit alone in a room, stare out of a window, and let your mind wander without a sense of urgency or boredom. But today, being alone without stimulation feels almost unnatural. Solitude and loneliness are not the same. Loneliness is an absence, a void that aches to be filled. Solitude is different. It's an intentional withdrawal, a conscious act of reclaiming space for the self. In solitude, you aren't missing something, you are finding something. It is where creativity thrives, where introspection leads to personal growth, where the mind is free to think without interference. Psychology and neuroscience affirm what philosophers have known for centuries: the mind needs silence. Overstimulation doesn't just clutter our thoughts, it depletes us. When the brain is constantly reacting, responding, and processing external stimuli, it never has the opportunity to work through deeper ideas. This is why moments of stillness, free from social media, free from stress, are essential. They allow the subconscious mind to do what it does best: form connections, solve problems, and foster insight. Many of history's greatest breakthroughs emerged from solitude. Newton's theory of gravity forged during his time of self-imposed isolation. Beethoven's compositions shaped by long solitary walks. Virginia Woolf's insights on creativity born from hours alone in her study. These weren't acts of withdrawal from life, but a deeper engagement with it. They prove that solitude is not the absence of connection. It is the space where true connection begins, but we have forgotten how to be alone. The constant demand for attention, the unrelenting flow of external validation, has made solitude feel foreign, almost unbearable. Digital detoxes and mindfulness practices have become trends, yet they are simply modern attempts to reclaim what was once natural. The ability to be alone, to sit with oneself without distraction, is an art we must relearn, because in solitude, the mind settles. In solitude, clarity emerges, and in solitude, we may finally begin to hear what we've been avoiding all along: the quiet, steady voice of our own consciousness. There's a myth that the best ideas come from collaboration, from brainstorming in a room full of people, from the energetic exchange of thoughts bouncing back and forth. But history tells a different story. The greatest minds, artists, inventors, philosophers, have always sought solitude, not as an escape, but as a necessary condition for deep creative work. Newton's insights into gravity, Beethoven's symphonies, Nietzsche's philosophies, Da Vinci's sketches, these weren't the products of distraction and noise, but of contemplation, of long stretches of uninterrupted thinking. Creativity flourishes in solitude because the mind is finally given space to breathe. Without constant input, it can make connections that weren't obvious before. The brain's default mode network, the system responsible for deep thought and problem-solving, is only activated when we disengage from external distractions. Neuroscience confirms this. When you're in solitude, your mind isn't idle, it's busy synthesizing, restructuring, and forming new ideas. The flashes of inspiration that seem to appear out of nowhere are rarely spontaneous. They are the result of thoughts incubating beneath the surface, finally rising when given the room to do so. Introspection and creative thinking are deeply connected. When alone, the mind turns inward, examining ideas from angles that would be impossible in the presence of constant noise. This is why great artists retreat to their studios, why writers isolate themselves with nothing but a blank page, why monks withdraw into silence. Solitude allows for the raw processing of thought, uninterrupted by external influence, untainted by the need for immediate validation. Carl Jung believed that true self-discovery required moments of isolation, that within solitude the deeper aspects of the psyche, the unconscious, the shadow, could emerge. And within that emergence lies the root of creativity. But modern life is designed to prevent solitude. Social media, notifications, endless digital stimulation. These things don't just distract, they fracture attention, preventing the mind from ever reaching a state of deep focus. A person today can go years without experiencing true, uninterrupted solitude, and as a result, their ability to think deeply, to create, to introspect deteriorates. This is why digital detoxing has become a necessary intervention. It isn't just about reducing screen time. It's about reclaiming the ability to think, to let the mind wander without interference, to give space for contemplation without the tug of constant interaction. Many fear solitude because they associate it with boredom, but boredom itself is a gateway to creativity. In a world conditioned for instant gratification, the discomfort of being alone with one's thoughts is something people have forgotten how to sit with. But it is precisely in those moments of nothingness, when the mind is free to drift, that the seeds of the most profound ideas take root. Einstein called this combinatory play, the act of allowing thoughts to blend in unexpected ways. He knew that creativity wasn't about forcing ideas, but about allowing the subconscious to weave connections in the background, something that only happens when external input is silenced. The greatest thinkers understood that solitude isn't a withdrawal from the world, it's an immersion into the deepest parts of it. To step away from the distractions of modernity isn't to disconnect from life. It's to engage with it on a level that is impossible in the presence of constant noise. Solitude is not the absence of something, but the presence of something far more valuable. An uninterrupted connection to the self, to inspiration, to the kind of thinking that changes everything. Most people move through life never truly hearing their own thoughts. The external world is too loud, too demanding. Every moment is filled with obligations, social interactions, the digital hum of notifications pulling attention away from the present. But in solitude, something remarkable happens. The noise fades, and in its absence, the mind turns inward. This is where mindfulness begins. Not as a practice forced into rigid meditation techniques, but as a natural byproduct of stillness. When alone, without distractions, the mind enters a different rhythm. Thoughts become clearer, the present moment sharper. In solitude, there is no external stimulus demanding a reaction, no social expectation shaping behavior, no need to perform for the world. There is only the self, raw and unfiltered. But this is precisely why solitude is so often avoided, because when left alone, without the endless stream of external validation, one is forced to confront what lies beneath. The unprocessed emotions, the unresolved anxieties, the fears buried under layers of distraction. This is why many people fear solitude. It demands self-confrontation. The mind, so used to being occupied, rebels against stillness. This is the reason digital detoxing feels uncomfortable at first. The moment the phone is put down, the mind, accustomed to constant stimulation, panics. It searches for the next thing to latch onto. This is the withdrawal effect of overstimulation, the psychological equivalent of noise addiction. But if one can push past this discomfort, something profound happens. The mind settles, thoughts become clearer, consciousness expands beyond reactionary thinking and into true awareness. In solitude, the layers of external conditioning start to fall away, revealing what was always there but never heard, the deeper self, the inner voice that is so often drowned out. This is where true personal growth begins. Philosophers, mystics, and spiritual seekers have always understood this. The Desert Fathers, the Stoics, Zen monks, all of them recognize solitude as a gateway to inner transformation. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the importance of retreating within oneself, of finding an inner citadel of calm that exists independent of external circumstances. Thoreau withdrew to Walden Pond not to escape life, but to engage with it more deeply. Even modern psychology recognizes the importance of solitude. Carl Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming one's full self, could not occur without it. Spiritual growth is often framed as something external, rituals, teachings, practices. But all of these things at their core point to the same truth, that the answers people seek are not outside, but within. That the most profound shifts in consciousness don't come from seeking more, but from stripping away everything that isn't essential. Solitude is the space where this happens. The world teaches people to accumulate, to seek more knowledge, more experiences, more interactions, but the deepest wisdom comes not from accumulation, but from stillness. It comes from removing what is unnecessary, from sitting in silence long enough to hear what was always there. In solitude, one learns to observe the mind rather than be consumed by it. Thoughts arise and pass, emotions surface and fade, and through this process a deeper self-awareness emerges. This is mindfulness in its truest form, not as an exercise but as a state of being. It is here that stress dissolves, that overstimulation fades, that a deeper kind of peace begins to take root. It is here that one realizes that solitude isn't loneliness, it is freedom. But modern life is designed to prevent this kind of self-reflection. Social media, entertainment, digital culture, it all thrives on keeping people externally focused, on ensuring they never stop long enough to question whether they are truly at peace. This is why solitude feels foreign to so many. But the ability to be alone, to sit in stillness without seeking escape, is one of the most powerful skills a person can cultivate. It is the foundation of mental clarity, of emotional resilience, of true inner peace, and it is something that can only be reclaimed by choice. Solitude doesn't just happen in a world built to prevent it. It must be sought, embraced, protected, because within it lies something priceless, the space to think, to breathe, to simply be. And in a world that never stops demanding attention, that kind of freedom is revolutionary. Modern life is built to keep the mind constantly occupied. The moment there is a gap, a second of stillness, the instinct is to fill it. Reach for the phone, open an app, scroll, tap, repeat. There is no space for boredom, no opportunity for thought to drift freely, no chance to hear the mind's own voice. Digital addiction is not just about time spent on screens. It is about attention, about the way the mind has been trained to crave stimulation, to seek constant input, to resist silence as if it were something dangerous. Social media has transformed from a tool of connection into a machine that thrives on keeping people engaged, endlessly consuming but never fulfilled. Every notification is a trigger, every like a dopamine hit, every new video another invitation to stay just a little longer. And so, the hours disappear. Neuroscience confirms what many already feel. These platforms are designed to be addictive, to hijack the brain's reward system, making it harder to focus, harder to sit still, harder to be alone. The overstimulation builds, layering stress upon stress, leaving the mind exhausted but unable to rest. The result? A population more anxious, more distracted, more overwhelmed than ever before. And yet, despite all the connectivity, people feel lonelier than ever. The only way to break this cycle is to step away, to intentionally reclaim the ability to be alone without a device, without the pull of notifications, without the endless stream of noise. But digital detox is not as simple as turning off a phone. The real challenge isn't in the absence of technology, it's in confronting the discomfort that follows, the twitchy feeling of withdrawal, the restless urge to check, the sudden awareness of just how much time has been spent escaping into a screen. For many, the idea of taking a break from technology feels impossible, almost threatening. What if something important is missed? What if boredom sets in? What if there is nothing to do? But these are the very questions that reveal the problem. When solitude has been replaced by digital dependence, when even a few moments without a device feel unnatural, it is a sign that something fundamental has been lost. A digital detox is not about abandoning technology. It is about resetting the relationship with it. It is about reclaiming attention, training the mind to exist without constant input, relearning how to sit in stillness without feeling the need to escape. Even a short break, an hour, an afternoon, a weekend, can be enough to feel the difference. The first moments will be uncomfortable. The mind will resist, searching for its usual distractions, but then something shifts, the noise fades, the mental clutter begins to clear, and in that silence, a forgotten sense of presence begins to emerge. Stepping away from screens, even temporarily, has measurable benefits. Stress levels decrease, creativity increases, sleep improves, attention spans begin to rebuild. The nervous system, constantly overstimulated by artificial urgency, finally has a chance to reset. And beyond the physiological changes, something deeper happens. The rediscovery of what it means to be alone without feeling lonely. The rediscovery of real moments, unfiltered and unmediated by a screen. A conversation without interruption, a walk without music, a morning without reaching for a phone. Many who attempt digital detox find that time itself seems to change. Hours stretch, becoming fuller, richer. Moments once rushed through become experiences to be lived. There is a stillness, a clarity, an awareness that was missing before, and this is where solitude begins to reveal itself, not as something to be feared, but as something to be treasured. The mind, once freed from the constant grip of overstimulation, starts to do what it was always meant to do. It thinks, it creates, it feels, it remembers what it means to exist fully in the present. The challenge is simple, but its impact is profound. Turn everything off, step away, see what happens, and when the discomfort passes, when the restlessness fades, what remains is something that cannot be found in a screen. A kind of peace, a kind of clarity, a kind of presence that has been missing for far too long. Boredom is one of the most misunderstood states of mind. It is seen as something to be avoided, something negative, something that must be filled as quickly as possible. But boredom is not a problem, it is an opportunity. It is the space where creativity begins, where thoughts take shape, where new ideas form. It is the gateway to deep thinking, to introspection, to the kind of inspiration that cannot be found in constant activity. The modern world has eliminated boredom. Every empty moment is filled with entertainment, distraction, stimulation. Waiting in line, standing in an elevator, sitting alone for even a few seconds, there is always a phone, always something to check, always something to consume. But what has been lost in this relentless pursuit of stimulation? The ability to simply be, to sit in silence, to let the mind wander without direction, to allow thoughts to unfold naturally, without the need for constant input. When was the last time you sat with nothing to do? No phone, no television, no background noise, just stillness. For most, this is an unfamiliar state. The moment boredom sets in, the instinct is to escape it, to reach for something that fills the space. But in doing so, an essential part of being human is lost. The ability to sit with one's own thoughts, to let them breathe, to see where they lead. Neuroscience confirms what thinkers and philosophers have always known. Boredom is not an empty state, but an active one. The brain, when not focused on an external task, switches to what is known as the default mode network, a state where deep thinking and problem-solving occur. This is why ideas often come in the shower, or during a long walk, or in those rare moments when the mind is left to itself. It is in stillness that connections form, that creativity flourishes, that the deeper parts of the mind are accessed. Yet people avoid boredom because it feels uncomfortable. Without stimulation, thoughts that have been buried start to surface. The unprocessed emotions, the unresolved questions, the deeper anxieties that are so easily ignored in the rush of daily life. This is why so many fear solitude. It forces an encounter with the self, with the thoughts and feelings that have been kept at bay. But this confrontation is not something to run from. It is something to embrace. Philosophers have long understood this. Blaise Pascal once wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. The wisdom of the past is now being confirmed by modern psychology. The ability to be alone, to sit in stillness, to embrace boredom, is one of the most important skills for mental clarity, creativity, and emotional resilience. Mindfulness, at its core, is simply the practice of being present without distraction, of accepting the moment as it is, without the need to escape it. There is a kind of peace that comes with learning to embrace stillness, a kind of inner strength that develops when one no longer feels the need to fill every empty space. Anxiety fades, stress lessens. The mind, instead of feeling restless, begins to feel expansive. Consciousness itself seems to stretch, no longer confined by the constant pull of the external world. But embracing stillness is not something that happens instantly. It is a practice, a mindset shift, a deliberate choice to resist the urge to always be engaged. It is about letting go of the fear of missing out, the compulsion to always be doing something, the belief that every moment must be filled with activity. It is about recognizing that within the quiet, within the boredom, within the moments of solitude, something invaluable is waiting to be found. Stillness is not emptiness. It is not a lack. It is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything that has been drowned out by noise. It is in stillness that clarity emerges, that peace of mind is cultivated, that spiritual growth takes root. It is in stillness that one realizes that solitude is not a condition to escape, but a state to embrace. And it is in stillness that life in its purest form is finally experienced. There is a moment after the noise has settled and the distractions have faded when the mind feels different, lighter, clearer, more present. It is the moment when solitude is no longer something to fear, but something to cherish. The modern world has conditioned people to believe that being alone is unnatural, that silence is an emptiness to be filled, that every moment must be occupied by something external, but that is a lie. True connection, true creativity, true peace of mind, they are not found in the endless pursuit of stimulation, but in the quiet spaces in between. In solitude, the mind resets. It processes what has been left unresolved. It makes connections that would otherwise be drowned out by noise. It finds clarity where before there was only distraction. This is not isolation. It is not loneliness. It is a return to something essential, something that has always been there, but has been buried beneath the weight of constant engagement. History's greatest thinkers, artists and visionaries did not fear solitude. They sought it. They understood that to know oneself, to create something meaningful, to experience life fully, one must first be able to sit alone without distraction and simply be. This is where philosophy takes root, where introspection deepens, where spiritual awakening begins. To retreat into solitude is not to disconnect from life. It is to engage with it on a deeper, more meaningful level. But solitude is not something that just happens in a world designed to prevent it. It must be reclaimed, protected, chosen. The first steps are small. A moment without a phone, an hour without interruption, a morning spent in stillness instead of consumption. These moments add up. The discomfort of silence fades, replaced by an understanding of what has been missing all along. Inner peace is not something that must be sought externally. It is already there, waiting beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. So the question is simple. Will you take it back? Will you reclaim your own attention, your own thoughts, your own space? Will you allow yourself the discomfort of stillness, knowing that beyond it lies clarity? Will you trade the endless noise for something deeper, something real? Try it. Step away. Let the mind breathe. See what happens. And when you do, when you find that moment of stillness, come back and share what you've discovered. What did you feel? What thoughts arose when the noise stopped? This is a conversation worth having, a practice worth sharing. And if you know someone who has forgotten what solitude feels like, share this message with them. Sometimes all it takes is a reminder, a single moment of silence to change everything.